Chapter 161. Jingwan continued to eat calmly. As for whether she was really calm or just pretending to be calm, only she herself knew. Li Hongyuan was wholeheartedly focused on feeding Jingwan. Other things, whether it was Princess Haiyang or the situation at the border, were put aside. What he changed was mainly in the imperial city of Qi Yuan. Except for Jingwan, he secretly gathered forces and secretly changed the structure of the imperial court. On the surface, it was not much different from the previous life. The biggest change was probably Luo Peishan. In the previous life, he always kept a low profile and basically did not participate in the fight for the throne. Outside the imperial city, there were naturally officials who were transferred, but everything was under control and there were no problems for the time being. Moreover, there were many spies planted in various countries outside the Qi Yuan. However, these spies were only focused on collecting information and were not allowed to act rashly without orders. These spies did not even know who their real masters were. So far, the situation outside the Qi Yuan had basically not changed. Therefore, even if Princess Haiyang didn't tell him about the situation at the western border, he also knew what was going on. It was just a small problem, but this small problem originated from the internal affairs of Qiyuan. In his previous life, if it wasn't solved properly, this small problem would lead to a big disaster. In the end, these soldiers united with the local military families who had been in business for 2 or 3 generations and became the local bullies, oppressing the ordinary people. As a result, the matter was reported to the court. His father sent people to deal with it, and Old Ninth and Old Tenth, who had just entered the imperial court, became imperial envoys. However, these 2 people were not young, and their respective families were also ambitious. They secretly urged them to do all kinds of things, and naturally, they had different opinions on this matter. In the end, because they could not reach an agreement, the problem was not solved for a long time. Due to the instigation of people with ulterior motives, it caused a riot. One of the emperor's sons, the Prince of Qi Yuan, was injured in the riot, and the other was arrested. The imperial court was divided into 2 factions. One faction advocated pacification, and the other faction advocated suppression. On the surface, Emperor Le Cheng was an emperor who did not like to fight. In the end, he made the decision to pacify the people, but he could not tolerate the culprits who caused the riot. After all, this matter made him lose face. However, when the imperial envoys were still on the way, the conflict at the border escalated again. The angry mob cut off one of Old Tenth's arms. The local garrison took the initiative to use bloody measures to suppress the riot. When there was suppression, there would naturally be resistance. However, the other party was a civilian after all. Even if they posed a threat to the garrison in the beginning, the consequences were self-evident. Moreover, the garrison was hot-tempered. In the end, he ordered the old, the weak, the women, and the children to be killed. One could imagine how big of a shock it caused. More importantly, the news of this matter was leaked from the beginning. Under the arrangement of people with ulterior motives, almost everyone in Qi Yuan knew about it as if it had grown wings. This caused the people's hearts to be unstable, and even the ruling status of the Li dynasty was questioned. When it rains, it pours. Not long after that, there was a big flood in the south, and millions of people suffered. Because of the inaction of the officials, there were very few problems with the embankments. In the end, Emperor Le Cheng was the one who took the blame for this disaster. Before Emperor Le Cheng's decree of guilt was issued, the victims revolted and robbed the local granaries. Moreover, the rich families and many of the officials did not have a good ending. In the end, the army was naturally deployed. It did not take long, about a month or so, to quell the riot. Fortunately, other places were already prepared, and the enemy country did not take the opportunity to attack Qi Yuan. After all, even if there was internal strife in Qi Yuan, it was still under control. To a certain extent, Qi Yuan was also a huge monster. If they wanted to take a bite out of it, it would depend on whether they had the ability to do so. After this incident, Emperor Le Cheng's face was gloomy for a long time. He originally thought that the enemy country was behind this, but in the end, it was completely an internal strife. In his previous life, Li Hongyuan was far less favored than he was now. Because he was outstanding and had a good reputation, he was qualified to compete for the throne. His father should have felt guilty towards him, but because he was outstanding, he was not liked. Because he was a Japanese, he was seen as an ominous person, and he was not qualified to covet the throne. However, he did not know that, and he was quite sad at that time. After this incident, his father disliked him even more. At first, he was puzzled. What did this have to do with him? Gradually, some rumors about his birth mother quietly spread. His birth mother was from the Pei family, the most powerful family in Jiangnan, and she was the daughter of the first wife. The Pei family was loyal to the royal family of the previous dynasty. The Pei family was not willing to be loyal to the new emperor, so they reached an agreement with the new emperor and retreated to Jiangnan. It was said that the Pei family was involved in the riot at the beginning, and the later uprising. However, there was no evidence. It should be known that Taizu had personally decreed that unless the Pei family committed a great crime of rebellion, the emperor of the Li family could not embarrass the Pei family. Without evidence, it meant that the Pei family could not be touched. Even if they wanted to secretly do something, it was not so easy. Because the Pei family was flourishing in Jiangnan, except for not entering the court as an official, they were involved in all other aspects. In particular, the Pei family had produced many famous scholars. These people had many disciples, and many of these disciples had entered the court as officials. Did you think that the Pei family had no influence in the court because they did not enter the court? Naive. Moreover, the Pei family had a high reputation among the people. Touching the Pei family was equivalent to touching the entire Jiangnan, and a large number of officials might be dismissed. It was even more difficult to deal with than the Sun family, which had Duke Dingguo. No emperor would like such a large and uncontrollable clan. Li Hongyuan, a son with the bloodline of the Pei clan, was naturally the target of his anger at this time. To some extent, this was the beginning of the change of Li Hongyuan's fate. But now, when Princess Heiang learned a little through her Rouge Pavilion, Li Hongyuan had already arranged everything. He still did not touch the overall situation, but only controlled the person who fanned the flames behind the scenes and planned everything. He would probably be sent to the capital soon. Li Hongyuan wanted to see if the person who was said to have died early in his previous life was a member of the Pei family. Mother's family? Oh, the tyrant Li Hongyuan had cut off more than half of the branches of the Pei family. The ones who went to deal with this matter were probably Old Ninth and Old Tenth. He had already removed the biggest disaster, but he did not know what their ending would be. If it was good, they would probably return with meritorious service. If it was bad, they would probably come back after messing things up. They would probably be trained and then abandoned by the people they relied on. Their lives would be over. As for the flood in the south, he had already made preparations 2 years ago. He had already strengthened the dam in the key areas. Although it was impossible to completely eliminate the flood, the serious consequences of the disaster would be reduced by at least 60%. As for the people who wanted to take advantage of this situation to cause trouble, he had already set up a trap. As long as they dared to make a move, they would immediately become a turtle in a jar. Jingwan saw that Li Hongyuan was lost in thought, so she did not disturb him. However, she saw him drinking cup after cup as if he didn't know what was going on. Moreover, he hadn't eaten anything in the first place, so it would definitely hurt his stomach. After all, he was her fiancé. Previously, they had hugged and lingered together, and he was very indulgent towards her. She hesitated for a moment. Your Highness, drinking on an empty stomach is harmful to the body. It's better to drink less. Otherwise, you should eat something first. Li Hongyuan looked at her with a smile, as if he had never been distracted. Jiao Jiao, are you worried about this prince? Jingwan also smiled, and there was no trace of the pitiful appearance from before. If your Highness wants to think so, it's not impossible. It's not easy to hear good words from Jiao Jiao's mouth. All right, I won't drink anymore. He casually threw the cup away. He picked up his chopsticks and hastily ate something. Jiao Jiao, are you done eating? Generally speaking, if the other party was done eating, she would eat well. If the other party wasn't done eating, she would continue to eat with them. However, when she thought about how they were still unmarried and how much he indulged her, she chose to be willful this time. She nodded. This subject's daughter is done eating. Li Hongyuan put down his chopsticks and approached Jingwan with a teasing smile. Jiao Jiao, you're putting out all the rules now. You weren't like this before. You were pinching and biting this prince, and you even had the guts to tell this prince to shut up. Jingwan blushed. What was she talking about that she shouldn't talk about? What, did he want to settle the score with her now? Jingwan didn't speak and just looked at him quietly. In the end, she wasn't as conservative as the local girls. This matter had already happened, and she had already been embarrassed. There was no point in continuing to hold on to it. Li Hongyuan was worried that if he annoyed her, it wouldn't be easy to eat her in the future. He reached out and pinched her face. This prince really doesn't know what to do with you. Without saying much, Eunuch Mu immediately called for someone to bring water to wash her hands and rinse her mouth. Li Hongyuan already wanted to help Jingwan wash her hands, but Jingwan avoided and refused. He raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything. Forget about the others, just wear these Buddhist prayer beads. Li Hongyuan took off the Buddhist prayer beads and wrapped them around Jingwan's wrist. Let's go, this prince will send you back. In fact, if he could, he wanted to keep Jingwan for a while longer. But it wasn't a short time. If he annoyed old Madame Luo, it would be disadvantageous for him to see Jingwan before the marriage. Although they had done more intimate things, but this kind of intimacy still made Jingwan somewhat at a loss. They had only met a few times before, so it didn't make sense for their relationship to suddenly become so close. Although it was mostly Jin Qinhuang's one-sided actions, he seemed to be very familiar with her. Everything he did seemed natural and casual. No matter who saw him, they wouldn't feel that he was a stranger. Other than this subject's third sister-in-law, is this how Wang Ye treats all of his previous fiancés? Jingwan curiously asked. Really, it was just purely out of curiosity. Li Hongyuan glanced at her and indifferently said, Ben Wang is not familiar with them. I haven't seen more than half of them. So the topic stopped and didn't continue. Li Hongyuan held her hand and matched her pace, walking slower. The courtyard next door is about the same size as this one. In front is Rouge Pavilion. This was originally Yun Niang's place. I want to renovate it. Jingwan knew that Jin Qinhuang was revealing some secrets to her. So, she only had ears and not a mouth. Jiao Jiao, you and I are together. You don't have to be so careful. My matters, there is nothing that you can't know. Many thanks for Wang Ye's love, but this subject's daughter feels that it is not the right time. Li Hongyuan helplessly sighed and didn't say anything more. Getting on the carriage, Li Hongyuan still pulled her into his arms and hugged her. It was just a simple hug. After sending Jingwan back to Luojiao, he saw her enter the door and her figure disappear. Only then did he let someone drive the carriage away. He didn't go to find Yun Niang. Instead, he directly returned to the Wangfu. In front of the gate of the Wangfu, there was an honored guest waiting for him. This old subject greets Wang Ye. The Grand Secretary came to the Yamen very early today. Li Hongyuan sat in the carriage. He just lifted the curtain and didn't have any intention of getting off. There is nothing to do today. Therefore, the officials of Qi Yuan were relatively free. After finishing their work, they could occasionally leave early. What business do you have with Ben Wang? If Wang Ye is dissatisfied with my daughter, you can ask His Majesty to withdraw the order. There is no need to humiliate her like this. Ruan Ruizhong said as calmly as possible. Heaven knows how distressed he was when he returned home and saw his wife and daughter crying until their eyes were swollen. Li Hongyuan sneered, Ruan Daren has always been dissatisfied with Ben Wang. You wanted to be a good subject, so you didn't resist the decree. Why should Ben Wang be a disobedient son? You flaunted yourself as a loyal subject of the country. For this, you can give up your beloved daughter's happiness, but you want Ben Wang to bear the reputation of being disloyal and unfilial. Do you really think that it doesn't matter if Ben Wang is covered in dirty water? Ruan Ruizhong, don't be too obvious about your double loyalty. Ruan Ruizhong's old face reddened. Li Hongyuan's words were not completely correct, but also not completely wrong. His lips trembled. In the end, my daughter is your fiancée. Wang Ye knows that she has always admired you, so he didn't talk about marriage. Chapter 162. Even if Li Hongyuan's words implied that his daughter was looking for humiliation, Wan Ruizhong had nothing to say. That's right, his daughter was just a concubine. In the end, she was just a concubine, and from the looks of it, the main character didn't seem to want her very much. It was also true that he indulged her. Every time he saw her silently crying in front of him without making a fuss, he would feel distressed. Then, without exception, his heart would soften every time. However, from the bottom of his heart, he looked down on Jin Qinwang, thinking that he was just a big fire pit. On this point, he firmly refused his daughter, always waiting for her to give up. Then, he delayed again and again, resulting in today's bad consequences. His daughter was beautiful, had a good temperament, was talented, and was even a good cook. Apart from her lack of temperament, in other aspects, he wasn't boasting, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to find a girl more outstanding than her. Originally, there were a lot of talented young men to choose from, and in the future, she wouldn't be bad. In the end, why did she have to take a fancy to someone that everyone else avoided? Just like him, he couldn't figure it out. It wasn't like he had to go to the Gong Prince's residence. Why did he have to get involved at this critical juncture? Li Hongyuan saw his constantly changing complexion, and could probably guess what he was thinking. Ruan Ruizhong was born to mix in with the officialdom, therefore, the ups and downs of the officialdom, to him, didn't affect him at all. Overcoming 5 difficulties and defeating 6 generals to reach the position of Grand Secretary of the Cabinet, all of this showed his extraordinary ability and extraordinary wisdom. However, such a man also had a fatal weakness. Because of his self-confidence, he was conceited, thinking that he would succeed in every endeavor. This was also true for women, so his second wife was obedient to him in every way, taking care of the inner residence properly, treating the children of the first wife as her own, and treating the children born of concubines as if they were her own. In his opinion, this was how it should be. That woman did a good job, so he gave her all his trust, never intervening in the inner residence, never paying attention to it, so naturally he didn't know what kind of scene was behind the orderly appearance of his family's inner residence. In the end, it wasn't that he trusted his wife, but that he believed in his own charm. However, why didn't he think about it? What right did he have? Her daughter-in-law was older than her. After marrying into the family, not only did she become a stepmother, but she also became a step-grandmother. You would find it too old to be a father. How could a teenage girl not have any complaints? Even the emperor who ruled the world did not have such confidence, right? Now, his wife was like a young married woman. When the two of them stood together, not to mention father and daughter, people would believe that they were grandfather and granddaughter. Not to mention other things, could he still get hard to satisfy his wife? Although it was normal for a woman to be alone after 30, and if that woman was really a good wife and mother, then it was fine. However, Li Hongyuan, who knew her nature, sometimes even maliciously thought, "Our powerful Grand Secretary, do you know how many green hats you've worn?" Ruan Ruizhong, who had been a winner in life for decades, ended up having his entire family executed in his twilight years. First, it was revealed that his stepwife had an affair with his son, and it seemed that they didn't even have the same son. Then, it was revealed that the youngest daughter of his first wife was not his biological daughter and belonged to some unknown man. Then, it was revealed that a letter of treason was found in his study. Of course, when these things happened, Li Hongyuan had already been forced to leave the capital. Qi Yuan was in the midst of a war at the border. When he returned, the Ruan family's matter had already come to an end. There was no way to know the details. He only found out by chance that Ruan Fengfei had married someone else and did not know where she went. Plus, she was not Ruan Ruizhong's biological daughter, so he did not pursue her whereabouts. In this life, because treason was not something that could be done in a short time, and Ruan Fengfei was far more persistent in him than in his previous life, Li Hongyuan had carefully investigated from the beginning. The results he obtained were really unexpected. Ruan Ruizhong, who had been shrewd all his life, fell into the hands of a woman. He was cuckolded and took the blame for someone else. He probably did not know what had happened even when he died. When he found out the truth, Li Hongyuan suspected that Ruan Ruizhong's stepwife might not have died in his previous life. She had hidden it well for more than 20 years. Why would she suddenly reveal everything? These things might just be to divert other people's attention to hide her true identity. If the water was mixed up, it would be easier for her to escape. Ruan Ruiz Hong was so conceited, and Ruan Fengfei was quite similar to him in this aspect. Therefore, Li Hongyuan was a little surprised that Ruan Fengfei was not his daughter. However, whether she was or not, it did not matter to him. Fortunately, Ruan Ruiz Hong was not like that when it came to political affairs. Otherwise, he would have probably fallen into a trap long ago. Seeing that there was no doubt about his ability, Li Hongyuan would definitely keep him for a few more years. Didn't he want to work hard for Qi Yuan until he died? If he did not squeeze all of his value out of him, wouldn't he be letting him down? However, he had to let him have a taste of falling into the dust. He had to let him know the truth bit by bit and see what kind of things the mother and daughter he held in the palm of his hand were. At that time, the expression of the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet should be very interesting. Li Hongyuan leaned lazily. He was in a good mood now, so he calmly added another stab to the Grand Secretary. Ruan Ruiz Hong, you don't like this prince, but do you think this prince likes you and Ruan Fengfei? Only you think that your daughter is a national beauty, a rare commodity worth hoarding. You treat her as a treasure, but in this prince's eyes, she is not even a blade of grass. In fact, you should be glad that you did not compromise and ask Imperial Father to grant you a marriage a year or two earlier. Otherwise, you and your daughter would have lost all face at that time. Did you know that if your good daughter enters the imperial family, she can't be the official wife because of Master Liaochen's order? She wants to marry this prince wholeheartedly, so she will live the life of a concubine for the rest of her life. Ruan Ruiz Hong was shocked speechless, as if he had been struck by a bolt from the blue. Li Hongyuan told him that he was not worried that he would say anything. It was impossible for him to ask his imperial father for confirmation, and it was even more impossible for him to tell his good wife and daughter. However, even if he said it, it didn't matter. So what if he already knew about it? Leaving behind Lord Ruan, who was stunned for a long time, Li Hongyuan returned home. However, when Yun Niang found out that Li Hongyuan had sent her little sweetheart home, he did not even think of looking for her. Who knew if she would fly into a rage? However, even Emperor Le Cheng could not do anything to her, let alone her hidden grandaunt. When Jingwan returned to the Luo residence, she had completely changed her clothes. However, the people who saw her along the way did not seem to have any abnormalities. Everyone was even curious as to why she came back so late. Back then, when Luo Jingying had sneaked out and returned, she had even changed back into her original outfit. She had been hiding all the way, but in the end, things had turned out this way. Now that Jingwan was so open and aboveboard, no one suspected anything. This was the biggest difference between being liked and disliked by the elders of the inner residence. When Jingwan returned to the elegant Begonia residence, Sun Yijia had been waiting for a long time. When she saw that Jingwan had changed from head to toe, she would never pay attention to how expensive the things on her body were. Instead, she would pay attention to the problem behind this matter. Just imagine, a girl went out alone with her fiancé for more than 2 hours. Moreover, she had completely changed her clothes. Anyone who knew a little would understand what this meant. If Sun Yijia did not have a good upbringing, she would not just be a little angry and irritable. When she saw that someone was more nervous than her, the knot in Jingwan's heart gradually disappeared. The lingering touch on her body also faded a lot. On the contrary, she felt quite happy. She smiled and said, "Sister-in-law, what are you doing? What are you smiling about? Look at the situation now. How can you still smile?" Sun Yijia could not help but pinch her. Jingwan smiled and dodged. At the same time, she grabbed her hand. "You're speaking so seriously. Is the sky collapsing or the earth sinking?" When Sun Yijia saw her reaction, she thought that she was overthinking. Then, she subconsciously reached out to pull Jingwan's collar. She only pulled it open a little. Her face was as black as the bottom of a pot. "I knew it. How can that bastard be a gentleman?" Jingwan hurriedly pulled her hand away. She really wanted to call her ancestor. She knew that she had good intentions, but she should at least take it easy. This was only her. If it were someone else, wouldn't it be embarrassing to expose such an embarrassing matter in public? Wouldn't that make them want to die of shame? Sun Ijia also belatedly realized that something was wrong. But she couldn't help but worry. Wn my, other than this, is there anything else? Does it hurt there? She leaned closer and lowered her voice to ask hesitantly. Jingwan was speechless. But at this time, she could only pretend to be stupid. With a puzzled face, she asked, where does it hurt? It doesn't hurt anywhere. Sun Ijia breathed a sigh of relief. It doesn't hurt anywhere. There's nothing at all. But she muttered, at least that bastard still has some humanity. Although this body's age was younger than Sun Ijia, in reality, it treated her as a younger sister. However, this sister-in-law was also worth it. After she approved of you, she would also treat you wholeheartedly. Not to mention other things, when she was bestowed marriage to Jin Qinwang, she did not say a word. But when it came to her own head, she had always been nervous. Even if she couldn't do anything, she still had to accept this favor. Jiao don't worry. It's really fine. Sun Ijia was like a frosted eggplant, wilting in the blink of an eye. Ever since she married Jingbua, Wn Mai didn't call her Jiao Mai anymore. This was really comforting her. She was a little annoyed. Maybe I shouldn't have told you these things. The more I say, the earlier you worry about the future. If you didn't know, you could still live a carefree life before you got married. But now, the things that should be known and the things that shouldn't be known will be known sooner or later. Even if it wasn't sister-in-law who told me, it would have been someone else. In reality, it's better to know from you than from someone else. After all, if I wasn't mentally prepared and was suddenly ridiculed by someone, I might not even know what was going on. So, I should actually thank Jiao Mai. Sun Ijia rolled her eyes at her. You can keep comforting me. Jingwan pulled her to the side and sat down. Sister-in-law, I feel that your mood seems a little unstable these days. Why don't you call the food doctor to take a look? Really? I don't think so. It's you who thinks I'm annoying. Jingwan was helpless and didn't mention it. On the other hand, Sun Ijia's wet nurse's expression was a little strange. The two of them didn't see it, but Mama Gong saw it. Third young madam, this servant knows a little about medicine and can accurately feel some common pulses. Why don't you let this servant take a look at you and treat it as a check of your pulse? That's good. Now that there's a result, this lass won't make up stories about me. As she spoke, she raised her hand and showed Mama Gong her wrist. As soon as Nanny Gong put her finger on her pulse, she felt that something was wrong. However, she couldn't be careless about this kind of thing. After a while, she asked her to use her other hand. Her serious attitude made the people around her nervous. Gong Mai, is there something wrong? Young madam's appetite hasn't been good these days and she's been feeling nauseous. I'm worried that she has eaten something bad, but young madam refuses to ask the food doctor to take a look. Sun Ijia's wet nurse couldn't care less at this moment. After all, she hadn't been married into the Luo family for long. If she mobilized so many people to ask for a doctor, she was worried that others would think that she was being nosy. Sister-in-law, this is wrong. How can you hide this kind of thing? It's just that my appetite hasn't been very good. It's just a small matter. Perhaps it's because the weather is hot. I've been suffering from summer. Third young madam, you're wrong this time. It's not just a small matter. It's a big matter. Seeing that everyone was nervous, especially her young lady who was asking about what was wrong, Mama Gong didn't keep them in suspense. Third young madam didn't eat something bad. She's pregnant. She's been pregnant for more than a month. I think she got pregnant a few days after the wedding. It's a joyous occasion. That's impossible. Sun Ijia was stunned for a moment before she immediately denied it. She got pregnant on her period last time. Mama Gong looked like she understood. Even if third young madam was young and didn't know anything, her wet nurse by her side should know. So this was the problem. This kind of situation does happen. Some people will have this kind of situation in the first month of pregnancy. It's just that it's much less than normal and it doesn't last that long. Gong Mai, now that you mention it, I'm afraid this matter is not far from the truth. Sun Ijia's wet nurse looked very excited and a little upset. I've heard of this kind of situation. Why didn't I think of it? My good sister, is there anything wrong with third young madam's condition? From third young madam's pulse, there's no problem. However, it's best to ask the estate's physician to take a look. Yes, you're right. I'll ask the estate's physician to take a look. Sun Ijia placed her hand on her lower abdomen. She was still in disbelief. However, when she saw her wet nurse about to leave excitedly, she quickly reached out to pull her. Wet nurse, because she was pulling her, Sun Ijia's body suddenly moved forward, scaring her quite a bit. My good girl, please slow down a bit. Because she was so nervous, Sun Ijia was not as nervous. Wet nurse, don't be anxious. It's better to report this matter to mother and let her make the decision. If you go excitedly to ask the physician for help, won't the whole estate know about it? People nowadays only reported the good news after the pregnancy was stable. Before that, except for a few people who knew about it, most people kept it a secret. Go directly to grandmother. Mother doesn't care about things. If you tell her as soon as possible, she probably won't be able to hide anything without giving her time to recover. She won't care about it. Instead, she'll be glad. Jingwan said, Qingzhu, go to grandmother's place and ask the estate's physician to come here. Tell him that I'm feeling a little unwell and that he needs to take my pulse. Yes, I'll go right away. Sun Ijia's wet nurse thanked Jingwan repeatedly. This is my sister-in-law. The child in her belly is my nephew and niece. There's no need to thank me. Jingwan looked at Sun Ijia with a smile and teased, you got pregnant a few days after your wedding. Sister-in-law, are you better than my brother? Your mouth is really infuriating. Sun Ijia was embarrassed and angry. I'm wrong. You're pregnant with twins now. Take it easy. Jingwan grabbed her hand. But sister-in-law, when you're feeling unwell, the people around you listen to you and don't ask for a physician. What about my brother? Does he also listen to you? Don't blame your brother. He's been a little busy recently. I didn't let him find out. What's there to be busy with? If he can't finish it, he'll postpone it. How can he even neglect his wife? Jingwan was dissatisfied. Sun Ijia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Who was to blame for this? She was the one who had been busy all day long. She just wanted her to be less busy, but she was the one who was playing the blame game. However, it wasn't a big deal to begin with. Why did little sister Wn think that her third brother had done something unforgivable? Was it that exaggerated? Qingmai, hurry and ask third young master to come over. Ask him to put those things aside. His wife and child are the most important thing now. Seeing Jingwan's tough attitude, Sun Ijia couldn't say anything to stop her. Because the couple's courtyard was just next door, Luo Jingbo came very quickly. It was obvious that he ran over directly. When Luo Jingbo appeared, he only had eyes for Sun Ijia. He didn't seem to see anything else. He carefully asked Sun Ijia if it was true. He looked very stupid. However, no one would laugh at him for becoming a father-to-be. Madame Luo came very quickly. However, she was someone who had been through a lot. Although she was happy, she definitely wouldn't lose her composure. She excused Sun Ijia from bowing and took Jingwan's hand out of habit. She looked at it until Jingwan couldn't help blushing. She then looked away, sat down, and looked at Sun Ijia. Qingzhu has already told me clearly. Ijia, since you've married into the Luo family, there's no need to be so distant. Your health is the most important thing. No matter whether it's a big or small problem, you should call a doctor as soon as possible. This time, it was also Wan's sudden suggestion. Otherwise, if it were up to you and Jingbo, what would you do if you accidentally hurt the child? And Jingbo, no matter what, you can't neglect your own wife. The husband and wife were very embarrassed by Madame Luo's words. They couldn't help blushing and repeatedly promised that there wouldn't be a next time. Fortunately, the resident's doctor rushed over at this time. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. The resident's doctor took their pulse. Nurse Gong's diagnosis was correct. Both mother and child were safe. Madame Luo also couldn't help but reveal a happy expression. This was the fourth generation of the Luo family. Jingda's daughter-in-law always had problems. This was very good. Naturally, it was worth being happy about. Moreover, she got pregnant so soon. It was a good sign. However, not long after they were happy, someone barged in and shouted, "Madam, something big happened." Madame Luo's face darkened. "Why are you so flustered? This is a ladies' courtyard. How dare a man like you casually barge in?" The manservant's face paled. "Madam, please forgive me. Madam, please forgive me. What happened?" Third master fell off a horse and broke his leg. Also, his waist was stepped on by a horse. Chapter 163. Not to mention the others, even Madame Luo was shocked. This was a sign of paralysis even if she didn't die. Madame Luo calmed down and asked, "Where is your third master?" Replying to Madame Luo, "He should be entering the door soon. I came back first to report. As soon as I saw Madame Luo, I went to the main courtyard to report to you. When I learned that you came to third Mrs. Courtyard, I was anxious and chased after you." Madame Luo immediately made a decision. "Old doctor, I'll have to trouble you to go to the third branch. This old one will understand the matter clearly and go there immediately. As for the matter here, I ask the old doctor to take care of it." Presumably, Madame Liu also sent someone to invite him, but he also missed the opportunity. At this moment, that servant was probably also on the way to Begonia House. Madame Luo is too polite. Since he was the consecrated doctor, he must keep his mouth shut in addition to doing things for the Luo family. However, she had just found out that she was pregnant, and such a disaster had happened over there. After all, it was not a good sign. "Madame Luo, this old man is not particularly good at treating this kind of illness. This old man suggests that you ask the Imperial Hospital for help. It's more appropriate." Well, it was still necessary to have self-awareness. Many thanks for the old doctor's reminder. She turned around and asked her mother to go back to the main courtyard to get Luo Peishan's invitation. The old doctor cupped his hands and left first. After he left, Madame Luo began to interrogate the whole story. "You should tell me everything clearly. Where did third Miss fall off the horse and why? Now that something happened to third Miss, you people who serve her can't escape the blame." The servant trembled and began to narrate. "Today, third master invited someone to go out of the city to ride a horse. When they arrived at Prince Kang's farmstead, they were interested and said that they wanted to go hunting, so they went into the forest. Third master and the others ran very fast. By the time this little one chased after them, something had already happened." Madame Luo frowned. "Your third master doesn't like to ride horses, let alone hunt. Why would he participate in it for no reason? Who took the lead? Moreover, it's not his turn to rest today. Old madam, it was Prince Kang's close associate who led the group. There were also several young masters from other families. There were a total of 7 or 8 people, all of whom were more or less related to Prince Kang. Third young master said that it was not good to refuse, so he changed the day of his holiday with the people from the Yamen. This was a disaster waiting to happen. However, Madame Luo suddenly realized that there must be something wrong with this. It seemed obvious who did it. Moreover, Prince Kang also had a motive to do this to the third prince. The third prince used to rely on him, but now his legitimate daughter had entered Prince Rui's mansion. Moreover, he had a bad temper and dared to betray him. Naturally, he would want to make up for it, or even kill the chicken to warn the monkey. However, Madame Luo's intuition told her that this matter was not so simple. Prince Kang's brain was not as smart as Prince Rui's, but he would not be so obvious. However, she could not rule out the possibility that he deliberately arranged this, which would make people think that someone was framing him. As for the specifics, he would have to rely on his master to investigate. "Why did you send your third master back? Why didn't you go straight to the clinic after entering the city?" The servant swallowed his saliva. "Old madam, they refused to take over." She understood. They were too seriously injured and were afraid that he would die in their clinic. Under normal circumstances, relatives would vent their anger on them. This was because they were worried that it would bring disaster to the clinic. However, none of the people who went with him came out to vouch for him. They went back after entering the city. Madame Luo sneered. A group of cowards. However, did they think that they could get away with this? If a man stood out to take charge, the Luo family might not do anything. However, since they were cowards, then don't blame the Luo family for being impolite. Go directly to the Yamen of the Ministry of Personnel and report this matter to my master. Yes. The servant hurriedly left. Madame Luo turned her head to look at Sun Yijia, who was rubbing her stomach with a pale face, and Luo Jinghua, who was standing beside her with his mouth tightly pursed. Don't let your imagination run wild. This has nothing to do with your child. However, Yijia, you can't report the good news to your mother for the time being. You have to rest for a while. As for the food, you don't have a small kitchen in your courtyard, so you can use one that's WNWAN. It's close, so it won't be inconvenient. Similarly, I'll build one for you after this period of time. Later, I'll have someone send you some money and send someone to buy it outside. Each branch had their own custom of buying things in private, so it wouldn't be conspicuous. Sun Yijia was naturally grateful for Madame Luo's arrangement. She was afraid that her child would be known as a jinx. However, she said, "Grandmother, there's no need for the money." Granddaughter-in-law. Madame Luo waved her hand to interrupt her. What the family should give you naturally can't be less. Every daughter-in-law of the Luo family is the same. Your own dowry is another matter. How you want to use it is also your own business. How can you confuse it with the portion that you deserve? You should pay special attention to this point. Only take it out when it's time to take it out, and when it's time to accept it, you must accept it. If you only take it out and don't take it in, after a long time, people will take it for granted and it will also increase the appetite of some people. When you don't take it out, it will instead become your fault. Thank you for your teachings, grandmother. An elder who didn't mean well for her absolutely wouldn't say such words. All right, hurry and wash off the makeup on your face. Jinghua, take good care of your wife. I'll go to the third branch to take a look. With Jingda's daughter-in-law as an example, Madame Luo now couldn't bear to see a pregnant woman put on makeup. Moreover, Sun Yijia didn't use makeup powder. Who knew if there was something harmful in it? Although she knew that if WNWAN dared to use something on her face, she should have already thought about it. Normally, there wouldn't be any problems. But now, both mother and son were delicate, so she had to be careful. Who in the Luo family didn't know about little Wang Shi's matter? Most likely, many relatives also knew. Only then did the husband and wife realize it. They hurriedly asked someone to fetch water to wash their faces. After that, they wouldn't be able to put on makeup for a long time. Originally, every time Sun Yijia came back from going out, she would wash her face immediately. But today, she was worried about Jingwan and was anxious, so she forgot to do it. Grandmother, I'll go too. Jingwan followed. Madame Luo glanced at her. Change your clothes and come back. Although these words were very normal, Jingwan couldn't help but blush. She felt uncomfortable that everything was seen through. Moreover, third uncle was seriously injured and she didn't know if he could survive. Her clothes were indeed a little delicate. Grandmother, go ahead first. I'll come after I change my clothes. Madame Luo nodded and left with her people. Jinghua, let's go and take a look too. After Sun Yijia finished washing her face, she whispered to him. Luo Jinghua frowned subconsciously. It's probably a busy time over there. We won't be able to see third uncle. Also, what if you get hurt? I guess the younger generation of each branch hasn't received the news yet. Let's wait. If something happens, grandmother will probably send someone to inform us. Also, if little sister wants to go, she has always been reliable. Even if grandmother forgets, she definitely won't. Sun Yijia thought about it and agreed. The child in her belly was the most important thing now. Jingwan changed her clothes and came out of the room. She was dressed plainly, but it didn't affect her temperament at all. Luo Jinghua reminded her twice. Jingwan nodded. Don't worry. Sister-in-law, just take care of yourself and don't worry about anything else. When Jingwan arrived at the third branch, eldest aunt Madame Wang, fourth aunt Madame Wu, and her mother were all there. As for the other women, They must be third uncle's concubines. Ah, this number was really large. The other 3 brothers probably only had this many concubines, right? Grandfather might not like third uncle, but in terms of teaching, there shouldn't be too much of a difference. But why was the final result like this? Was it really because of their own problems? These women cried endlessly, but with grandmother outside, they didn't dare to cry too loudly. They only sobbed softly. She wondered if these women were really sad or worried about their future. If Luo Rongbing died, the Luo family wouldn't ignore them. But if they didn't have children, they would be in danger. Among these people, there were no good concubines or noble concubines. If Madame Liu was ruthless, she could sell them all. Therefore, they didn't want Luo Rongbing to die the most. That's right, they just didn't want him to die. Anyway, when he was well, they were also neglected and paralyzed in bed. Jingwan didn't see concubine Huan, who made third uncle and third aunt completely fall out with each other. Concubine Huan was probably serving in the room. She was also pregnant now, so she wasn't afraid of accidentally bumping into her. Speaking of which, these women's clothes were really very ordinary. To be honest, Jingwan felt that they couldn't even compare to the maids by her side. Compared to the other branches, the third branch was indeed a lot poorer, but it shouldn't be to this extent, right? Was it because Madame Liu embezzled, or they really didn't have the money to support them? Maybe it was both. In the Luo family, each man's concubines were only given to 3 people. If there were more, they would raise them themselves. Luo Rongbing obviously didn't have the money to raise them, but he raised so many of them. After a while, he threw them aside and didn't care about them. What was going on? It was no wonder that Madame Liu was so ruthless to them. As for why she didn't sell them, not only did it cost money to raise them, but it also made people uncomfortable. Perhaps, as the saying goes, if the old doesn't go, the new won't come. Madame Liu probably wanted Luo Rongbing to see. There was already a pile of them in the room. How to raise them? In the beginning, he had not been able to take out anything decent to please the beauty. Based on his character of wanting to save face and putting up a false front, he would probably be too embarrassed to bring anything into the room. As for asking him to sell it himself, don't joke around. This kind of losing face. If he gave them away, he could still make friends with them, but he would probably be beaten half to death by Luo Peishan. Seeing Jingwan, Madame Zhong hurriedly came up. WN, I just heard that the doctor came from your place. Are you feeling unwell? Why didn't you tell me? Mother, I'm fine. I probably used some ice last night. The doctor has already seen me. I don't need to take any medicine. I was going to tell you, but I didn't have time. Madame Zhong was relieved when she heard this. I know you suffer from summer, but it's still early from the hottest time. You can't use the ice basin now. Otherwise, when it's the hottest time, the basin will still be hot. It's not good for a girl to be exposed to too much cold air. I know, Mother. There's no need. Madame Zhong still wanted to say something, but Jingwan gently squeezed her hand, so she swallowed back her words. Jingwan respectfully greeted the others. Needless to say, Madame Luo, Madame Wu had always liked Jingwan, and Madame Wang was grateful to Jingwan because of Madame Wang's matter. Naturally, they all hurriedly asked her to get up. In the Luo family, no one else received this treatment except her. Jingwan sat next to Madame Luo. Grandmother, how is the situation? Madame Luo's face was cold and solemn. It's worse than expected. The doctor is not sure. However, even if a divine doctor comes, the best case scenario is that he will be paralyzed in bed. The worst case scenario, needless to say, everyone knew that if something went wrong, the Luo family would have to hold a funeral. Jingwan also did not expect that her third uncle would fall into such a situation. Although Luo Jingying did not get along with her, Madame Liu was scheming and could not bear to see others doing well, and Luo Rongbing was utilitarian and wanted to climb up the social ladder. None of them were likable. However, Jingwan only disliked them, but she did not hate them. One had to know that it took effort to hate a person. Jingwan was too lazy to waste her energy on them. Therefore, she did not want them to die. What was the saying in her previous life? If they are not doing well, I will be relieved. Jingwan had a bit of this mentality. As for these three people, if they had not already arrived at their bad destination, then they were on their way to their destination. Jingwan would not go against her heart and say that she was sad about her third uncle's situation. She just felt a little sad. However, the three little children of the third branch were all there. Only the legitimate son, Luo Xiaoba, was not there. As for the eldest son, Luo Jingming, he should still be attending classes at the Imperial College. Where is Xiaoba? Is he still studying at home? It's better to have someone bring him back. Madame Luo nodded. Yes, we should bring him back. Otherwise, if something happens. Also, Jingming, go to the Imperial College and inform him to come back quickly. Also, go inform Area. The people of the third branch could not leave at this time. Madame Luo directly sent someone to pick up Luo Xiaoba, but the person who came to pick him up came back very quickly. However, when she saw his appearance, Madame Luo could not help but burn with anger. Not only was his body dirty, but he was also crying. This child was already 9 years old, not 3 years old. How did he end up like this? What exactly is going on here? Where is the person who served him? Where the hell did he go? Madame Luo was quite fond of the children of the third branch, except for Luo Jingying. Madame Lu's treatment of her two children could be said to be completely opposite. Not only did she not let the slightest bit of dirt on her son, she even raised him to be a little too pure and even a little delicate like a girl. In addition, his temperament was not bad and he liked quite a lot of people. How could she not be angry when he ended up like this in her own home? The manservant behind her scrambled in and without saying anything, he directly knelt down and kowtowed to beg for forgiveness. This manservant was only 2 or 3 years older than Luo Xiaoba. At this time, he was quite frightened. Jingwan hurriedly got up and comforted the still sobbing Luo Xiaoba. Together with Mama Gong, she took him to wash up and change his clothes. However, as soon as they stepped out of the door, they met the maidservants and wet nurses who rushed over. When they saw Luo Xiaoba's appearance, they even forgot to greet Jingwan and kept saying, "Little ancestor, how did you end up like this?" Jingwan looked at them coldly. She did not care whether they were sincere or not. Hurry up and take him to wash up. Facing Jingwan's cold eyes, the maidservants and wet nurses could not help but tremble and hurriedly responded. Jingwan narrowed her eyes. "Mama Gong, you go with them." Mama Gong also knew what Jingwan meant. There was a little ghost around the 8th young master, but she did not know who it was. She was too lazy to ask about Madame Lu's matter. But now that they met, Luo Xiaoba's surname was Luo, and he was the master. How could she watch him be bullied by some demons and monsters? Yes, Miss Jingwan went back and heard the servant's narration. It was indeed a lesson at home, but she did not know why Luo Xiaoba suddenly wanted to come back. Luo Xiaoba had always been obedient at home. When he asked the teacher for leave, the teacher also agreed. However, as soon as he entered the courtyard of the third branch, the servant needed to pee, so he left for a while. But when he came back, he was gone. He stopped a passerby and asked about it, and then hurriedly came back. When he saw his master again, he was already like this. That is to say, he did not know what happened when he left. Was the servant's departure just a coincidence, or was it deliberate? It was a crime to leave without taking good care of his master. Seeing that he was still young, Madame Lu gave him a light punishment and only gave him 10 strokes. Madame Lu naturally cared more about her son. She had been sitting in the room. When she heard that something happened to her son, she hurriedly came out. But when she saw Madame Luo's cold face, she hurriedly stopped. A woman's husband was the sky. At this moment, she did not know whether her husband was alive or not. But because of her son's trivial matter, she did not care about her husband. "Mother." Her lips trembled. She did not know how to speak. "Do you think I'll let my grandson suffer a loss?" "Mother, I didn't mean that." "Then I'll have to trouble you." She reluctantly turned back. When Luo Xiaoba was brought back, other than his eyes being a little red, there was no other problem. "Madame Luo, when I was changing 8th young master's clothes, I saw that 8th young master's hands and knees were bruised." This servant took the initiative to ask. Eighth young master said that his servant went to the toilet. He was about to come back to find third madam, but he was suddenly pushed and fell to the ground. Not only was he bruised, but he was also pressed down on the ground. That servant told him that third young master is gone, and third madam is not liked by you. In the future, he will be a pitiful worm in the Luo family. Madame Luo stroked her sleeves. He really has guts. It was not a heavy sentence, but even Madame Wang, who had been in charge of the family for many years, could not help but tense up when she heard it. Madame Luo waved at Luo Xiaoba. Xiaoba, come here. Grandmother, Luo Xiaoba went over. Is my father really gone? Do you really not like me anymore? Don't listen to those people's nonsense. Your father was accidentally injured. Nothing will happen. Our Xiaoba has always been an obedient child. How can grandmother not like him? Tell grandmother, who was the person who said these words to you and pushed you? Madame Liu usually looked fierce, but now she couldn't even manage her own courtyard. Grandmother, I don't know. I was pushed from behind. It seemed to be a maid in a green dress. Except for the people in this room, gather all the servants of the third branch. Eldest daughter-in-law, you deal with this matter. If there is anything wrong, don't be polite. They will all be sold as guilty slaves. Yes, mother. First aunt, I have a small suggestion. I don't know if I can say it. Jingwan stopped Madame Wang. What can't you say? Just say it. Third young lady has always been smart. Maybe you can quickly find the real culprit. First aunt, you flatter me. Separate everyone and find more people. At the same time, ask them what they have done, who they have seen, and even what they have said during this period of time. Record them one by one. Madame Wang immediately understood after Jingwan said this. Her eyes lit up. Third young lady, this is a good idea. After comparing them one by one, it will be clear at a glance who is the culprit. We can even extend the time. Those who are alone will also know if they are doing what they were supposed to do. Jingwan nodded. First aunt, you are very thoughtful. Third young lady, don't flatter me. Then, they just had to wait for the results. However, the imperial physician had not arrived and the situation inside was getting worse. The physician was now trying his best to keep third master Luo alive. As for the concubines outside, even though Madame Luo was there, they couldn't help but cry even louder. Madame Luo had a headache because of them, but she didn't say anything to stop them. Luo Jingming hurried back. His forehead was covered in sweat and his face was red. When he entered, he couldn't stop panting. Grandmother, father. How is father? It's not good. The imperial physician hasn't arrived yet. Sit down and rest for a while. Why hasn't the imperial physician arrived yet? Luo Jingming was in disbelief. The imperial hospital was obviously much closer to his home. I'll go out and take a look. Then, he turned and left without giving anyone any chance to stop him. Madame Luo sighed. When the Liu matriarch married into the family, Luo Jingming was already born, and he was a boy. It wasn't hard to imagine that he was definitely a thorn in the Liu matriarch's side. In less than half a year, Luo Jingming's own concubine died. She committed suicide, and the Liu matriarch was framed. In reality, many people knew that the Liu matriarch didn't do it. However, everyone knew that the Liu matriarch would make a move on the mother and son sooner or later. If the Liu matriarch simply died, she could still protect her son. Thus, even if the Liu matriarch felt like there was a fishbone stuck in her throat, she didn't dare to do anything. When Luo Jingming was enlightened, he was assigned to live in the outer courtyard. Among the brothers, he was the youngest to live alone. It was also because of this that although he hated the Liu matriarch, he wasn't blinded by reason. On the contrary, this tender seedling was perfectly straight and was growing healthily. He was very outstanding, and he wasn't any worse than the legitimate sons of the first and second branches. Luo Rongping also thought highly of him. However, with Luo Peishan watching over him, it didn't matter if he pretended to obey, but if he brought his son along, Luo Peishan would definitely beat him to death. It was also because of this that the relationship between the father and son was actually relatively pure. Therefore, Luo Jingming really admired Luo Rongping. Luo Rongping was his closest relative by blood. Therefore, if something really happened to Luo Rongping, Luo Jingming would be the only one who would be heartbroken and in pain. Then, not long after, Luo Jingming ran back with a person on his back. There was no doubt that that person was the imperial physician. Just by listening to the sound of running outside the door, one could tell how fast he ran. After entering the door, he staggered and almost fell. Fortunately, he was quickly pulled back by the people around him. Imperial physician, I'm sorry for troubling you. Luo Jingming's legs turned to jelly and he almost fell again. Previously, his face was flushed because of the vigorous running, but now it was a little green. This wasn't a good thing. All right, you should quickly rest by yourself. Imperial physician, please come in, Madame Luo said. The old imperial physician was quite old. At first, he was very displeased when he was treated so rudely, but now he was a little envious. What a filial child. The imperial physician went in and was about to help Luo Jingming sit down when Jingwan hurriedly stopped him. She asked the servant to help Luo Jingming walk around. If he couldn't be helped, she would find someone else to help him. In short, he couldn't stop and rest immediately. Jingwan was never one to speak without thinking. She must have her reasons for saying that. Jingwan saw Luo Jingming smile at her and felt an inexplicable sense of suffocation in her heart. This cousin of hers actually had a very good personality and treated his younger siblings well. She once heard from third brother that he had secretly helped second cousin with Luo Jingqiang. Now, he was also secretly helping the 3 younger siblings of the third branch. His own expenses were basically the small portion of the family's allowance and half of it was given out. He actually lived very frugally. Third brother wanted to help him, but he refused every time. He was very clear-minded and would help when he could. He always controlled the extent of his abilities. Luo Rongping was such a person. It was worth it to have such a son in this life. However, as father and son, they also proved that feelings were mutual. Actually, did Luo Jingming not know at all what Luo Rongping was doing? No, he should more or less know, but he couldn't say anything. To a certain extent, he was actually sandwiched between Luo Peishan and Luo Rongping. That kind of feeling was probably not good. At this moment, Jingwan hoped that Luo Rongping was only paralyzed and would not jump around outside. That way, second cousin would feel much more relieved. As long as he was still alive, second cousin would not fall into the pain of losing a loved one. Another imperial physician and their entourage arrived soon after. Jingwan's father, Luo Rongyan, was also with them. After asking, they found out that they had met on the road. Also, the reason why the imperial physician was so late was because the prince's brother-in-law was injured. It wasn't serious, but when the Luo family went to invite the imperial physician, they deliberately delayed the imperial physician. Everything seemed to indicate that they were deliberately doing this. It's Prince Kang again. Madame Luo frowned. Luo Rongyan heard her words that seemed to have a deeper meaning. He also frowned but did not ask anything. Now, he could only wait quietly. Half an hour later, Wang returned. Obviously, what happened to Luo Xiaoba had come to an end. Wang just whispered to Madame Luo. Jingwan naturally would not inquire about Wang concealment. However, in the Luo family, there was probably no one else but concubine Huan who would have bad intentions towards Luo Xiaoba. Whether today's matter had something to do with her or not, in short, the people around Luo Xiaoba who were bribed by her should have been removed. However, concubine Huan could compete with Madame Liu because she still relied on Luo Rongping. It didn't make sense for her to let people attack Luo Xiaoba at this juncture. She was still so despicable. Wasn't her original intention to let Luo Xiaoba get close to her and alienate Madame Liu, and then secretly destroy Luo Xiaoba's body? Maybe she was just bribed by her to make her own decision. After this incident, Madame Liu could be more alert. However, without Luo Rongping to rely on, it should not be difficult for Madame Liu to deal with concubine Huan, right? The other members of the Luo family came back one after another. Luo Peishan, on the other hand, came back later than usual. When he went to the third branch, there was only old Madame Luo, his other 3 sons, and Luo Jingming. How is the situation? The imperial physician said that his life should be saved, but I'm afraid that he will have to lie in bed for the rest of his life. The exact situation will be seen tomorrow morning. Tonight maybe. I left the 2 imperial physicians in the residence. Luo Peishan nodded and then looked at Luo Jingming. This grandson was too quiet at this time. Go back and rest. Come back tomorrow. Grandfather, okay, there's no need to say anything more. I've already asked someone to apply for leave for you at the Imperial College. Thank you, grandfather. Go back. Yes, I'll take my leave. After Luo Jingming left, Luo Peishan's eldest son, Luo Rongwen, immediately asked, Father, what exactly happened to third brother? That's right, they did not believe that this was really an accident. Luo Peishan glanced at them. There's no value in being alive. There's only value in being dead. There was even a hint of ruthlessness in his words. This meant that Luo Rongping was still alive and this matter was an accident. Only when he was dead would they investigate to the end. Father, why did this happen? Luo Rongyan frowned in confusion. He despised this third brother of his who was snobbish, but he was still his own brother. Why did he not say anything when an outsider bullied him? Why? Because there's balance. Even His Majesty is happy to see this kind of balance. Prince Kang's family has Jingguo's wife, but because her face was disfigured and she's only Prince Kang's cousin, the value of the marriage alliance weakened. As for Prince Rui, his 4th daughter became his concubine. She's only a concubine after all, so there's only so much value. The imbalance before was because of third brother's involvement. Now that third brother is like this, is it completely balanced? Luo Peishan sneered. I told him long ago not to get involved in this kind of thing, but he insisted on doing it his own way. His extravagant hopes for riches and honor. He doesn't even know if he has the ability and the fate to do so. Heaven's sins can be forgiven, but the sins brought on by oneself are the hardest to bear. Then, who did it? Luo Rongwei asked. Previously, he stuck with Prince Kang. Later, he wanted to use his daughter to achieve meteoric success with Prince Rui. Who do you think did it? His offense sitter. Does he think that others don't know? Then it's Prince Kang? Luo Rongwei scratched his head. Idiot. Luo Peishan scolded. As long as San Yi said that he couldn't leave her and wanted her to serve him, she could protect herself. As long as she gave birth to a child, whether it was a boy or a girl, she could think of a way to settle down. With the eldest son of the 3rd branch as an example, she wouldn't stupidly kill herself. It should be possible to let Laoi take care of her. If it was a girl, then they could only blame that they didn't have the fate of mother and daughter. She thought that Mrs. Liu just wanted to take the opportunity to torment her, so she was very obedient. She didn't expect that there was such a big trap waiting for her. She knew that she was not easy to deal with, but she still underestimated her. Mrs. Liu didn't leave just now. Perhaps she knew that Laoi was coming, but she didn't know. She could set a trap. It didn't matter if it succeeded or not. But obviously, not only did it succeed, it was also fatal. When they heard old Madame Luo's summons, they tidied up their clothes and came out one after another. Because there were several men, either eunuchs or uncles, with their heads slightly lowered, their eyes fell on the ground. She greeted him politely. Did you hear what we said before? What do you want to say? Luo Peishan went straight to the point. Although Mrs. Liu didn't hear as much as concubine Huan, Luo Peishan's last few words were almost enough. Because of Luo Jingying, she had already sobered up a lot. It was simply a dream to try to restore her family. Her mother had died early, and her father had also passed away. Now, her elder brother was in charge of the Liu family, but he was just a loser. Although he had the title of a count, he was idle all day long and didn't work. He didn't have much wealth to begin with, so naturally, he lost it even faster. From time to time, he would come to her place to ask for money. Even if the emperor's grace was vast and mighty, and he was promoted, could he support it? Would the Luo family think highly of him? Would her status in the Luo family be raised because of this? The answer was actually very obvious: no. The Luo family was a scholarly family and a family of etiquette. Her father-in-law and mother-in-law were not snobbish people. When you were down, they would not hit you when you were down, and when you were rich, they would not covet your slightest bit. She should have seen this fact clearly a long time ago, but she was unwilling. But now, what could she do even if she was unwilling? Everything was just a delusion. If she really dared to do anything else and make the Luo family abandon her, she would really have no way to live. She had once threatened Luo Rongping by beating the drum. She wasn't tired of living yet. Mrs. Liu directly knelt down. Father, mother, in the past, this daughter-in-law was insensible and caused you a lot of trouble. In the future, this daughter-in-law will live a good life and raise the children well. I will not ruin the Luo family's reputation. Did she really think it through? It seemed that this person really knew how to reflect on herself in despair. However, Mrs. Liu's words didn't seem to have anything to do with her husband. It could be seen that until now, her heart was still filled with resentment. In fact, from Mrs. Liu's point of view, it was natural for her to feel resentment. Whether you really think so or it's just a temporary measure, this is your last chance. Old Madame Luo said. Mrs. Liu's body trembled slightly, and there was a trace of joy in her heart. Concubine Huan also hurriedly knelt down and expressed her position. Master, old madam, this concubine is willing to take care of third master for the rest of my life. If something happens to third master, please wait for this concubine to give birth to a child. Then, this concubine is willing to be buried with third master. If Luo Rongping heard this, he would probably be very moved. He might even hug each other and have a touching scene of life and death parting. Tears would fall like rain and he would be heartbroken. Unfortunately, the men present were far from being as protective of the fairer sex as Luo Rongping. Moreover, their brother's concubine had nothing to do with them, so they wouldn't even look at her. Moreover, that's your man. Isn't it right for you to do that? And for old Madame Luo, concubine Huan's little tricks were simply not enough. She looked at her meaningfully, then looked at Mrs. Liu, who had lowered her eyes. Third daughter-in-law, she is a member of your third branch. You are the mistress of the third branch. Naturally, you should deal with this matter. However, there are some things that should be left to rot in your stomach. If you say it out loud, it won't be good for anyone. Yes, this daughter-in-law understands. Mrs. Liu respectfully responded. In that case, keep an eye on third master tonight. If there's anything, immediately report to us. Luo Peishan gave his final instructions, then got up and left. Old Madame Luo followed closely behind, followed by the other three masters. Mrs. Liu stood up and glanced at concubine Huan, who was still kneeling upright. Someone come. The maidservant guarding outside immediately came in. Madam, send someone to concubine Huan's courtyard and bring her daily change of clothes. Concubine Huan will serve third master day and night. In the future, concubine Huan will live in the back room of the main house. In order to protect herself, this bitch would make any choice. Mrs. Liu would naturally fulfill her wish. Serving people had never been an easy job, especially a person who was fine one moment and paralyzed the next. Her temperament would inevitably change greatly. This kind of person would probably only prove that she still existed and was superior to others by torturing others. Who else could be more suitable for this task than concubine Huan? Mrs. Liu bent down slightly and patted concubine Huan's mother. Third master likes you so much, and he also trusts you very much. In the future, you must serve him well. Don't let down his feelings for you. Madam, don't worry. This concubine will definitely serve third master well. Concubine Huan said. It was almost impossible to detect any difference from her tone. Mrs. Liu nodded. That's good. Mrs. Liu was actually looking forward to it. She wanted to see how long this bitch could last. She would not let anyone help her. Eating, drinking, going to the toilet, everything would be taken care of by this bitch. Moreover, Luo Rongping was the third master of the Ministry of Personnel. Even if he was paralyzed, Mrs. Liu could not abuse him. Therefore, once he felt uncomfortable, it must be because this bitch did not serve him well, hehe. When concubine Huan heard Mrs. Liu's laughter, she could not help but feel a chill in her heart. An eyesore of a concubine, without a man to rely on, she could only be kneaded and squashed by the mistress. She could not resist. Don't say that there were so many people around her before. When she worked for her, those people were the best at taking advantage of the situation. Moreover, she belonged to a lowly concubine. To put it bluntly, she was the property of the master and mistress. Now that the master was gone, she was firmly controlled by the mistress. Didn't she hear Mrs. Liu say that she would only pack a few clothes for her? In other words, everything else no longer belonged to her. You can get close to my son under my nose and bribe the people around him. Originally, I thought that you were capable. However, I have been waiting for you to do something stupid. But, in fact, you don't have that ability. You schemed against the third young lady and then framed me. You have always wanted to do this, right? It's a pity that you can't even get close to that girl. In this backyard, it's possible for me to scheme against anyone. There are only two people that I won't directly reach out to. One is the old madam, and the other is our third young lady. Touching the third young lady's hair is more serious than scratching the old madam's body. In the whole mansion, only my stupid daughter insisted on going up to find trouble. I have already told her not to directly confront her. However, she is also a young lady in the mansion. The old madam only punished her. If it were you or me, the old madam will definitely skin us alive. Do you believe it or not? The more Mrs. Liu said, the more she felt that it was reasonable. Before, she realized that she could not directly attack that girl, Luo Jingwan, but she had never been so clear-headed. She also had to bear a large part of the responsibility for her daughter's current situation. Once she started to be clear-headed, she would be completely clear-headed. But now, she could not take care of her daughter. Chapter 165. What would happen to concubine Huan in the future could almost be predicted. She probably never thought of such an ending, right? She touched her belly that was already more than 4 months pregnant. This might be her last hope, but at this moment, she still couldn't help but feel panic in her heart. The old madam had handed her over to Mrs. Liu to deal with. She had no power, and no one. In the future, she was afraid that she would be completely trapped in the house. Only in this way could she ensure that she would keep her mouth shut. Whether this child could be born or not, it was all up to Mrs. Liu. She had long heard that the old madam didn't like concubines. The concubines of each branch basically didn't have a chance to show their faces in front of her. This time, she really experienced it unforgettable. Not to mention, some concubines flattered the old madam and then suppressed the mistress. In the Luo family's backyard, it was simply a dream. Even if the old madam didn't like her daughter-in-law, it was absolutely not their turn to step on the legal wife and mistress. In this regard, old Madame Luo was definitely the best mother-in-law. Mrs. Liu seemed to have seen through her thoughts. Don't worry, I won't do anything to you. After all, without you, what should ye do? I don't know if he thinks so, but you must have thought so before. Naturally, I will fulfill your infatuation. I won't touch the piece of meat in your belly, but I don't think ye will like others to serve him. You have to take care of him and the child, Mrs. Liu sighed with pity. So, you must take good care of yourself. Concubine Huan's heart was even colder. This was Mrs. Liu's real purpose. At this moment, concubine Huan even had the idea of letting Luo Rongping die quickly. But she couldn't. If he died, she would probably be buried with him. Although her birth had eliminated the possibility of her being the legal wife, she thought that with her talent, beauty, and skills, it was easy to firmly control a man's heart. Even if she wasn't the legal wife, she could still get whatever she wanted. No one dared to look down on her. Before today, she also thought that she was living such a life, but it turned out that it wasn't. No matter how fiercely she fought with Mrs. Liu, in fact, the Luo family didn't take her seriously. If they really wanted to deal with her, the man she relied on would absolutely not be able to stop them. Before, it was Mrs. Liu who made the old madam unhappy and didn't want to help her. Did she hate her? Of course, she hated her. But who should she hate? The old madam? Mrs. Liu? Her man? Or should he blame the heavens for being unfair? Madame Liu took one last look at concubine Huan, who was pretending to be calm on the surface, but in fact, her heart was close to collapse. Madame Liu also felt that she was so stupid in the past. She clearly had a mother-in-law who stood on the side of her daughter-in-law in this aspect, but she had to court death and make her unhappy. Otherwise, no matter how Luo Rongping was, there would never be so many foxes in this backyard. She glanced at the bedroom behind her and saw the man lying unconscious on the bed through the wall. Even if he wasn't dead, he wouldn't be able to get up. This source of trouble had been completely cut off. In the future, she wouldn't have to be so tired anymore. After the initial pleasure, her heart calmed down again. Luo Peishan and old Madame Luo, as well as their sons, each went to their own place to think. Whether it was a good night's sleep or a sleepless night's sleep, they didn't mention it for the time being. After Qin Tianming went to the Yamen, he had already gone to the gate of Jinqin Wang's mansion to ask for forgiveness. In the end, he was a first-rank military governor. Li Hongyuan didn't do anything to him. He just let him kneel for 2 hours. There were few people coming and going in front of the gate of Jinqin Wang's mansion, but it wasn't that there weren't any. Therefore, Qin Tianming's matter was estimated to be known by everyone. However, Qin Tianming was a miserable person. This apology was just for outsiders to see. The real apology would be at night. Li Hongyuan didn't say much. He just pulled him to the martial arts field and the two of them practiced. In terms of martial arts, there was probably no one who could win against Li Hongyuan in a one-on-one fight. He was a battlefield. He had been baptized by blood for a few years. If one wanted to fight with him, one would only die faster. Therefore, the result of the practice was that Qin Tianming was beaten down again and again. His whole body was covered with invisible scars. However, there were no injuries to his muscles or bones. It wouldn't affect his daily life. But at this moment, it was very painful, very painful. When Qin Tianming curled up on the ground and couldn't get up again, Li Hongyuan stopped and squatted down. "Do you know your mistake?" "Master, this subordinate knows his mistake." The way he addressed him was his good attitude at this time. "What did you do wrong? You didn't teach your daughter well. You didn't teach your son well. Qin Tianming, 3rd Miss Luo is your future mistress. The only one. She and I are one. We will live and die together." Li Hongyuan's tone wasn't heavy, but the weight of his words set off huge waves in Qin Tianming's heart. Right now, he only felt that his master was really benevolent. His daughter had been so offended, but she didn't lose a single hair. As for the rest of them, they were only injured. They weren't crippled or killed. This wasn't a great kindness. "Master, don't worry. This matter will not happen again. Otherwise, this subordinate will personally end that evil girl. You don't need me to teach you what to do with your son-in-law, do you? Master, please don't worry." After touching his son, they still continued to have such thoughts. Did they really think that he, Luo Peishan, was made of clay? Not long after, Le Chengdi summoned him. Luo Peishan tidied his clothes and entered the palace with a solemn expression. Le Chengdi said that he had also just heard the unfortunate news and was grieving. "How is your son?" he asked with concern. "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. My son's life is not in danger. It's just that." Luo Peishan's indifferent face flashed with a touch of sorrow. "It's just that I'm afraid that in the future, he will be entangled in bed and won't be able to get up again." Le Chengdi sighed. Luo Peishan, even if he didn't smile normally, was full of a scholarly aura and didn't make people feel that he was cold. However, today, he was emitting an aura of strangers don't come near. It could be seen that perhaps he was really in extreme pain. "However, beloved official Luo, how did your son get into this accident? Have you investigated clearly? I'm also confused about this matter. If someone did something, just tell me. I will definitely seek justice for you." "Why do you say that, Your Majesty?" Luo Peishan was slightly puzzled. "My son was an accident. Speaking of it, it's also his fate. If he really wanted to seek justice for him, he should directly hand this matter over to the Supreme Court for a thorough investigation. It could be seen that this matter was really what the emperor in front of him wanted to see. However, there was no other way. He was the emperor and he was the subject. As the saying goes, if the emperor wants the subject to die, the subject has to die. It was easy to deal with other people, but the emperor couldn't find a way to settle accounts with him. Moreover, he wasn't the real culprit. He didn't even add fuel to the fire. He just didn't do anything after knowing that the matter wasn't simple and then hoped that some people would keep quiet. Lechengdi was very satisfied with Luo Peishan's tactfulness. He let people reward Luo Rongping with a lot of good medicinal materials and specially allowed the imperial physician to stay in the Luo family for a few more days. On the surface, this matter was covered up like this. Of course, it was only on the surface. At least, Prince Kang was now in a terrible fix. First, he was scolded by the Empress. Although she didn't use a dirty word, her words were all saying that he was an idiot, and a failure. Prince Kang was so angry that his veins were bulging, but he still didn't dare to lose his temper at the Empress. He just explained that he didn't do it. As a result, he was scolded even more miserably by the Empress. If he did it and was caught, at least he was worthy of the name. If he didn't do it and was framed, that was more incompetent and sullen. Speaking of which, Prince Kang's temper was so bad at other times because he was too sullen in front of the Empress. He was bound to get to the bottom of this matter. In addition to wanting to prove himself, he didn't want to take the blame for his sworn enemy. Luo Rongping's fence-sitter behavior naturally angered him. Even if he pushed all the blame to Prince Rui and expressed his loyalty to Prince Kang didn't believe him at all. Thus, he wanted to teach him a lesson and punish him as an example to others. He originally planned to make him fall off his horse, but the key point was that he still let people take action. Then, he gathered the relevant people together for a trial. However, the results made him break out in a cold sweat. These people told him with certainty that they did it because they were instructed by him. But they didn't have any evidence. After all, who would leave evidence for such a sinister thing? Jie Yang received the news from him the night before. Because it was consistent with his previous hints, and the number of people they met was also correct, other than Prince Kang and his confidants, no one else should know about it. Thus, he didn't have any suspicions. Then, he stalled for time and aggravated Luo Rongping's injury. This was also part of the plan. In this case, how could Prince Kang not feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave? This framing was very thorough, and it also indirectly proved that there was really a big problem around him. Otherwise, how could the enemy carry out his plan so easily without suspicion? In a flash, Prince Kang became a bird startled by the twang of a bow. It seemed that everyone was suspicious, so he became more and more irritable. Originally, when he learned that Luo Peishan treated it as an accident and didn't want to investigate further, as the people involved, they should more or less visit him to express their sincerity. After all, they went back home after the incident, which was very immoral. However, Prince Kang didn't know what was wrong with him. Not only did he not agree to this, but he also brought the matter to Lechengdi and asked Lechengdi to prove his innocence. In the court, all the civil and military officials were present. Lechengdi hinted that this matter was an accident and stopped here, but Prince Kang didn't seem to understand and told him that he was wronged in a tearful voice. Lechengdi was so angry that he wanted to strangle him to death. Well, he had proven his innocence, which confirmed that Luo Rongping was framed by someone and not an accident. No matter who the culprit was, as the executor, none of the people involved in this matter could escape. Those people were all Prince Kang's people, more or less related to him, and some were even his brothers-in-law. Now, all because of him, they were sent to prison and were trapped like this by the master they were loyal to. He reckoned that Prince Kang would be so angry that he would vomit blood. As for the others, they were afraid that they would have a cold new life. What kind of future would they have if they followed such a person? Even if they risked their lives for him, who knew when he would sell them out? His heart wavered, so he naturally thought about whether he should choose another master. Prince Rui and the others looked at him with vigor. This kind of person, Perhaps he didn't need to do anything to be finished. In fact, Prince Rui was still considering whether to let Luo Jingying go home to visit family, but in the end, she was only a concubine. Her status was too low. It should be known that even ordinary concubines didn't have the qualifications to go home to visit family. If a concubine was allowed to go home to visit family, it would definitely be a great honor. Only her man would spoil her to the heavens. However, a mere concubine was too much of an honor. If he dared to set this precedent, he was afraid that the imperial censor's saliva would drown him. After thinking about it, he could only give up. Perhaps he could send a steward to visit the Luo family in the name of Luo Jingying. In the end, Prince Kang only knew that his imperial father believed him and that he didn't do it. As a result, Prince Kang felt refreshed, as if he didn't realize the seriousness of this matter at all. After the morning court, Le Chengdi flew into a rage and almost overturned the imperial table. He kept calling Prince Kang a fool. Prince Kang's behavior was not only pushing his own people out, but also slapping his father's face. Le Chengdi, the emperor, regarded it as an accident, but his son unceremoniously tore down his father's face. Son Yilin was next to him. He lowered his eyebrows and narrowed his eyes, looking more and more cold. He had already seen through it. No matter how ambitious his aunt Empress was, there was no hope for her to realize it in this life. This drag was so strong that others couldn't pull her back even if they worked together. Duke Dinggua's mansion was also in a mess. His strong rise had suppressed his elder brother's development, but there was no other way. He was not only fighting for himself, but more importantly, for the future of Duke Dinggua's mansion and even the Sun family. If he did not do something, he was worried that Duke Dinggua's mansion and the Sun family would be completely destroyed by a certain king of hell. He had lost his beloved woman and had to bear the fate of his family alone. From time to time, he had to face the intimacy of the Empress. Sun Yilin felt very tired many times. Every time this happened, he would sit in the flowers for half a day, alone and quiet, not wanting to be disturbed by anyone. Prince Kang was called by the Empress again and pointed out the interests to him. But Prince Kang didn't care. There were so many people who were loyal to him, and it didn't matter if there were a few fewer. He was the eldest son of the legal wife, and no one was qualified to compete with him. The Empress waved her hand and let him leave. She didn't even bother to give him a sentimental idiot look. At this moment, the Empress was really thinking about supporting another prince, a prince who would listen to her 100%. But it was a little difficult to choose. It was not suitable for someone too young. The fight for the throne was almost white-hot. By the time the younger one grew up, it would be too late. But there was no one who was qualified for this fight that she could firmly control in her hands. Now she was a little regretful. Why didn't she adopt a prince in the early years to prepare for a rainy day? Her son was actually quite smart when he was young. Even a few years ago, he seemed to be good. Why did he become more and more disabled after experiencing so many things? The Empress rubbed her swollen and painful temples. It was really not easy to change the person now. Perhaps she should prepare for both sides. Previously, she thought that it would be enough to find him an obedient stepwife. Now it seemed that this was not appropriate. There needed to be someone who was close, opinionated, and knew how to talk to him from time to time. It seemed that the Luo family's third young lady was indeed a very suitable candidate. Unfortunately, if she had known this would happen, she would have made a prompt decision to fight with the emperor. Even if she let Luo Peishan continue to be the Minister of Rights, and even if she gave Yilin some compensation, she was now the fiancée of Li Hongyuan. It was not a wise decision to fight with him. However, perhaps she could make a fuss about him bringing bad luck to his wife. There were too many examples before. But now the Emperor and Lady Su were watching the Luo family's third young lady closely. It was not so easy to make a move. Empress Sun narrowed her eyes and thought quietly. At the same time, she was calculating in her heart. If this matter did not succeed, who else would be suitable? In her heart, she searched through all the unmarried young ladies in the capital. As for whether Jingwan would have any thoughts in the future, it was not within the scope of her consideration. After a woman got married, her heart would naturally be loyal to her man. The Empress did not think about whether she herself was loyal to Le Chengdi. As the victim, Luo Rongping of the Luo family naturally knew about this matter at the back of the Luo family. It was Luo Peishan who sent people. Jingwan and Sun Yijia were eating fruits. A certain king of hell sent people to deliver fruits. Since a long time ago, there was an endless stream of fruits every day. Some fruits that were easier to store and transport were naturally sent more, while others were less. Especially when Sun Yijia saw it, she was very surprised. In the past few years, even in the palace, it was extremely rare. This also confirmed what Li Hongyuan had said. Jingwan was silent, and then she decisively hid the fruits. If there was more, she would share some. If there was less, except for a little bit sent to old Madame Luo, she kept all the rest. Her mother did not even have any. There was no way, her mother could not hide it. Doing this was just to avoid attracting trouble. After all, the palace did not have it, but you ate it every day. What was going on? Even if Jin Qinwang did not care about people knowing that he brought these things back, the palace was not willing to give them. Wasn't that unfilial? As the beneficiary of the benefits, Jingwan naturally had to help cover it up. Therefore, the Luo family only knew that Jin Qinwang sent a lot of fruits to Jingwan. Only a few people knew what exactly it was. Sun Yijia couldn't help but tease Jingwan. Sure enough, she was different. Even that king of hell, who had seen countless beauties, was so attentive. She had never heard of any of the previous fiancés receiving this kind of treatment. Eating can't even block your mouth. Jingwan gave her a sidelong glance. Sun Yijia quickly shut her mouth. Because she heard Jingwan say that eating more fruits was good for the baby, other than those that were easy to get heaty, she ate a lot. However, for those that were smaller in amount, even if she was hungry, she only ate a little. If she really listened to WN Mai and ate all of it, other than the people serving WN Mai would be unhappy, the old madam would definitely have thoughts. More importantly, if that king of hell knew, he might skin her alive. She herself was also very strange. Before she found out that she was pregnant, her appetite was bad. After she found out, her appetite gradually became better. Although she would still feel nauseous when she smelled some special smells. Those before, it was probably the wrong time. And sister-in-law, you are a special case. Sun Yijia was surprised at first, then she understood what Jingwan was saying, who knows. After all, Jin Qinwang had his first fiancée at the age of 16. It has been 6 years since then, who would pay attention to those things? I am a special case, this point is not false. I am definitely the one that he dislikes the most. Regarding this point, Sun Yijia did not particularly care. Who wanted to be liked by that king of hell? If he really cared about WN Mai and treated WN Mai better, perhaps Sun Yijia's opinion of him would be less. That's right, sister-in-law, you should have a mama by your side who specializes in this aspect. Jingwan pointed at Sun Yijia's stomach, but your side seems to be. For a noble lady like her, it was basically standard to have someone like Gong Mama. Even if she did not burn, she would not make a mistake like eating a bad stomach. Sun Yijia paused, then said without care, last year in December, she was driven away by my mother. She had a daughter who wanted to climb into my fifth brother's bed. Fifth brother was very angry, so their whole family was angered by my mother. Jingwan laughed. It's not that I want to say this, but your mother values your fifth brother too much. In the future, she will definitely be incompatible with your fifth sister-in-law. Right now, I'm very glad that I broke off the engagement with your fifth brother, really. Sun Yijia saw that she did not avoid this matter at all. It could be seen that she really did not care. She could not help but sigh for her fifth brother in her heart. What incompatible fire and water? The premise was that there must be such a person. But looking at her fifth brother's state, in the short term, it was very difficult. She was even worried that her fifth brother would not be able to walk out of it in this lifetime. That's right, it's good to break it off. Is it better than marrying into Jin Qinwang Fu? Jingwan teased. Maybe. According to Jin Qinwang's current attitude, he should not be too cold to you. After you marry, there will be no one above you to suppress you. Even if there are secondary concubines, they will not be able to surpass you. If you want to deal with them, there are many ways. But if you suppress a difficult mother-in-law, you will only be sullen. Sun Ijia lightly said. Therefore, the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law in this ancient era was perhaps even more blood-vomiting than the relationship between the legal wife and the concubine. Not to mention that it was like her previous life, where one wrong move and the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law would fight. Many times, the daughter-in-law would suppress the mother-in-law. Try it here, as a daughter-in-law, if she dared to talk back to the mother-in-law, it would probably cause the sky to fall and the earth to sink. How is your mother? It's just like that. In any case, her actions are not very nimble. All day long, she is making a fuss about fifth brother marrying a wife. Many of uncles' and aunts' families' female cousins have been called over to Ding Guogong Fu. You must know, in the past, my mother simply did not like them. You say, how ironic. As for other things, fifth brother will probably let her do as she pleases. Only when it comes to marrying a wife, I estimate that 3 to 5 years is short. There's nothing wrong with being late. Just like in her previous life, it was normal for men to marry in their 30s. Ian, now is indeed not the right time. Young lady, third young madam, old madam has sent someone over. A servant girl came to report. However, what was more surprising was that the person sent by old Madame Luo was Luo Peishan's personal manservant. Jingwan's heart slightly moved. Is there any new change in third uncle's matter? Thus, that manservant repeated what he had just told old Madame Luo to Jingwan and Sun Yijia. After Jingwan finished listening, she gave a reward and sent that manservant away. She was silent for a moment. Sister-in-law, this cousin of yours is actually an expert in placing righteousness before family. There was simply a hole in his brain. There was a saying, do not fear a godlike opponent, but fear a pig-like teammate. And Prince Kang, as the core figure of the faction, was so deceptive. Even a godlike person could be deceived to death by him. If it happened 2 more times, she was afraid that even the most loyal hardcore would abandon him. What's the point of fighting for the throne? He should just wash his neck clean and wait to be slaughtered. Sun Yijia was speechless for a long time. He really wasn't this stupid before. Pausing, she seemed to have thought of something. Actually, cousin-in-law is a very smart woman. She is wholeheartedly devoted to Prince Kang. Cousin-in-law is seriously ill. It's not that she didn't work too hard. When you get married in the future, I will properly thank Jin Prince. Jingwan understood in a second, because he messed up your marriage with Jin Prince. Actually, listening to how she addressed Prince Kang and Prince Kang Qin Wang Fei, one could know how she felt about these two people. Sun Yijia nonchalantly made an en sound. If he can treat you well, I will be even more grateful to him. It wouldn't be a problem to set up a long life memorial tablet for him. What nonsense are you saying? Jingwan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. As a result, Sun Yijia looked at her very seriously. She really wasn't lying. Jingwan was a little helpless, but her heart was warm and very comfortable. That's right, Wn Mai. Do you know about Wan Fengfei's situation? Why are you mentioning her for no reason? Jingwan was very displeased with this person. Such an obvious dislike. If there was no problem, then it would be fake. Who let my Niang always tell me to learn more from her? Seeing her also suffer in the hands of Jin Prince, I was happy. So, if I could hear news of her misfortune, I would be even happier. You're not this kind of person, so you don't have to discredit yourself like this. Ask Mama, she should know. Usually, she's the one who tells me these things. At this time, Gong Mema wasn't present. Third young mistress, Nubi also knows about this. Nubi will tell you. As Jingwan's maidservants, they definitely had a common enemy with their mistress. Even if they didn't know the reason why Jingwan hated Wan Fengfei, they were still their common enemy. So, if Wan Fengfei was not good, they would be happy. So, if she wasn't good, they definitely had to pay attention to it. Jingwan looked at the Qingju, who was full of gossipy spirit, and thought it was funny, but she didn't stop her. Because of Sun Yijia's personality, there weren't any lively maidservants by her side. Even when she was young, the little maidservants who served her were trained to be well-behaved, as if they were carved from the same mold. According to her mother's words, being too lively would lead her astray. When she first found out about the Qingju's nature, she was actually quite surprised. After interacting with her a few more times, she found that this kind of personality wasn't bad. Okay, you say it. If you say it well, you'll be rewarded. Qingju giggled and agreed. Then, she began to narrate the story vividly. It must be said that these past few days, the outside world was abuzz with rumors. First, it was Jin Prince causing a ruckus in the Gong Prince Fu, then it was Luo Rongping falling off a horse. Of course, because the latter involved a factional struggle, very few people talked about it openly. However, it spread throughout the entire imperial city. Whether it was in the backyard of a large family or in the marketplace, the topic of conversation was Ruan Fengfei. Compared to Sun Yijia's disfigurement, it was more than 10 times more serious. Therefore, the rumors were all centered around Jin Prince's words. Something about her face being disfigured like a yaksha, suffering from a chronic disease, or that she was actually a stone woman, or even that she wasn't a virgin for a long time. All kinds of malicious guesses were piled on her, with no limit to exaggeration. One person spread it to 10, and 10 people spread it to 100. The initial guesses later became the truth. There were even people who came forward and patted their chest to guarantee that everything was true. And the people who heard it, no matter how outrageous, spread it out again. If Ruan Fengfei dared to appear now, perhaps there wouldn't be a single person within 100 zhong radius. How high she was once praised, how miserably she fell now. Don't talk about Ruan Fengfei, even the other members of the Ruan family don't dare to go out. It's estimated that other than the Grand Secretary, no one in the Ruan family has not been affected. Even those servants who came out to buy things, if they weren't treated differently, they would be asked if the masters of the Ruan family were really like the rumors. At the beginning, whether it was the masters or the servants of the Ruan family, there was no shortage of fights outside. It seems that after the Grand Secretary spoke, the situation calmed down a little. However, those rumors have become more and more intense, especially those young ladies who are close to her. This servant estimates that in order to distance themselves from her, those people will most likely alienate her. It's that serious. Jingwan was very surprised. It shouldn't be. It's reasonable to say that the original source was Jin Prince, and it was in the Gong Prince Fu, so it shouldn't be this outrageous. At most, it should be in the backyard of a large family. Sun Yijia felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Perhaps someone deliberately fanned the flames and did it on purpose. Jingwan's gaze flashed. She inexplicably thought of that man. It's reasonable to say that he wasn't the kind of person who would do this kind of thing, but on that day, it was indeed him who said those words. It doesn't matter if it is or not, in any case, my mood right now is very good. Who told her to do some bad things to Wn first? Public opinion can melt gold, accumulation can destroy bones. This wasn't something to joke about. If the person involved didn't care, the damage might not be too big, but how many people could truly not care? Not to mention the current situation where reputation was greater than the sky, even in Jingwan's previous life, rumors and slanders could drive people to death. In her previous life, transportation was developed and it was convenient to travel. If one couldn't stay in one place, they could easily change places. But here, it wasn't so easy. Thinking of the things that Ruan Fengfei did to her, Jingwan couldn't sympathize at all. However, Jingwan felt that that kind of abnormal species, her ability to withstand pressure wasn't ordinary. She couldn't possibly be unable to recover from this setback. So much so that when she appeared again, she might become even crazier and harder to deal with. She had to thoroughly beat her into the dust and lose her freedom. She had to struggle in despair, and after struggling, she would find even more despair. Only in this way could she vent her hatred. In this way, is it possible for her marriage with Jin Qinwang to be cancelled? Jingwan stared blankly. If her guess wasn't wrong, if she really liked Jin Qinwang, the cancellation of the marriage, for her, would probably be one disaster after another. I don't know. Although her reputation is bad, but in the end, it's His Majesty's decree. You say, if the marriage is really cancelled, would it be counted as Jin Qinwang bringing misfortune to his wife? No matter, A Ce Fei is just a concubine. It should be that Jin Qinhuang's fate of bringing misfortune to his wife has expanded. Sun Yijia rejoiced in other people's misfortune, but she didn't know whether it was Jin Qinhuang, Wan Fengfei, or both. Jingwan rolled her eyes at her. What about me? Is sister-in-law cursing me? How can you be the same as them? You are Great Master Liao Chen's 8 characters, a match made in heaven. It shows that he can't bring misfortune to you. It's best if he brings misfortune to all the women close to him except for you. Then, he can only have you. Sun Yijia felt that her idea was very wonderful. Then, WN Mai could also be a pair for a lifetime. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.